In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I made this French cleat wall. You can see it's a work in progress. I only have 3 units holding a couple different things up there, but the nice thing about this project is I consider it a very simple project. You don't need a lot of tools, and everything you see except for the original cleats that hung on the wall are being made with scrap plywood I have around the shop, so it's very inexpensive. I know there's multiple ways to hang tools or storage. I chose this because I wanted the versatility of being able to move stuff around. So to start this project, I bought an entire sheet of 3/4 inch oak veneer ply. You do not have to use such a nice grade of lumber. You can even use cheaper ply. I like 3/4 inch because it's a little bit of a beefier material. And I chose the oak veneer because I do plan on either staining this or clear coating it, and it just looks a little bit nicer than maple and some cheaper plies out there. Since I was using scrap to make this, buying that sheet of ply wasn't that big of a deal. So I just cut that entire sheet into 3-inch wide sections. Then I tilted my blade to 45 degrees and I sent all of those strips through so they're all uniform. Now there's lots of schools of thought about how wide to make these pieces. I decided to go with a width that would be able to cover the whole wall and leave room for maneuverability. I find that thicker pieces, you're going to be left with less configurations. I wanted to be able to move this stuff out of the way. If you watch my channel, you know I make a wide variety of materials, and there are going to be times where I might have to move some of these units off of the wall or further up. So I wouldn't make them much thinner than this, but that is how I decided on that dimension. I lightly sanded the edges of these because, believe it or not, once you rip those 45s off, the edge is pretty sharp. And then all I did was I leveled my first strip on the wall. You can see I started in the center, put a level on there, and worked my way out. Now I just framed out this wall so I know exactly where all the studs are. If you're doing this in your shop, obviously you're going to have to find the studs. One of the reasons I framed out this wall was I knew I was going to be hanging a lot of stuff on it, so I wanted nice solid connections to the 2x4s holding up the wall. If you're doing something on metal studs, or if you have concrete, this process might look a little bit different for you because anchoring to those can be a little more difficult. But I'm going right into 2x4s, so it was pretty easy. Then all I did was I took a spacer from around my shop. Like I said, I'm kind of gauging this based on how big I thought the units that I'm hanging on the wall are going to be. You want to be able to have whatever you're hanging on the wall span a couple of these cleats so that they have more stability. So I basically went with about 3-inch wide sections, and I spaced them about 3 inches apart. Like I said, you might have to play around with this. I didn't want to spend a lot of time figuring out math. I kind of went with 3 and 3 and then was going to see how well that worked, and so far I have no issues. So now all I'm doing, because I had found the studs on the bottom, could transfer my stud marks all the way up the wall, and all I'm doing is using that spacer and just laying out the wall. Like I said, super simple process. It's not a lot of material to start this. 1 sheet of ply, and I'm getting probably, these are 10-foot ceilings, so they're a little deceptive. They're not 8-foot ceilings, but I'm easily getting about 6 inches, and you can see I even put 2 extra cleats over where I'm going to have my laser engraving station, but it was a pretty simple process. Now I was kind of eyeing the level all the way up to make sure things will level. At the top it's a little deceptive because this ceiling actually slopes from the back of the shop to the front, so my walls level, the ceiling is not. And then once I had all of those on the wall, I could start building some of these units that are going to be movable on there. I started with my chisels. I started with tools that I use a lot that I don't have great storage for, that are just laying around the shop. Like I said, I'm building most of this out of scrap. I do a lot of cabinetry work, so I always have these little cut off 12 by 12 pieces of ply that aren't really useful for a lot of things other than jigs and stuff like this. If you're buying all of this stuff, this sort of design could get kind of pricey. And then I just kind of roughly laid things out. I'm using the tools that I'm putting on the wall to guide all of my measurements. Sometimes I would draw this stuff out, it wouldn't look right, and I'd start again. But like I said, this is a utilitarian wall. I know that some people have gorgeous storage in their shop. They spend a lot of time making stuff like this. There's nothing wrong with that. For me, I want to be able to have a spot to hold my tools. I did not want to spend a lot of money to do it, and I didn't have a lot of time to do it. This footage is easily over a month old. I did this over the course of like maybe 2 afternoons to get everything done. I'm just drawing the measurements on there for people that might want to duplicate this stuff. You could see all my spacing. I'm writing out on this piece of wood for people that might want to copy this. And I didn't have a lot of time to do it because I'm working projects like this. I'm always working on in between customer projects. So it's kind of a little bit of a build your own adventure. You can design these as you want. My goal was to make them look nice, to spend some time making all of the parts symmetrical, but not be super time consuming. So to drill out the holes for the chisels, I started from the top and then I flipped over because those spade bits, you'll have a lot of tear out if you don't do it that way. So I usually try to drill from both ends. And then I can just mark the openings for where the chisels are going to go. You can see it's pretty simple. A lot of times I'm just working from center, working my way out, measuring the shaft of the chisel to decide how thick I needed those to be. And I decided to cut these little grooves with a dado stack and the radial arm saw. You're going to get tear out on the bottom of this from that. But once again, like I said, I'm not super concerned about stuff like that for this sort of utilitarian wall. And I can just gauge it and cut all those grooves. And that is what that chisel holder looks like. A lot of these processes you could do multiple ways. I just had my tools set up a certain way in the shop. I had the dado stack and the radial arm saw. So instead of using a jigsaw or something like that, it was just easy enough to use the radial arm saw. And then I just have a chamfering bit in my trim router, and I chamfered all the edges just so they're not super sharp. You can see the tear out on the bottom of this one. And that is basically what that looks like. I sanded off all of my marks, and then I'm going to attach this to the backer, which will have the cleat on it. So like I said, fairly simple process. So this is just another piece of scrap ply. This is the maple veneer ply, which I usually use when I'm painting something, because it's about $10 to $15 cheaper than the oak veneer sheets. And if you're painting it, it doesn't matter because you'll never see it. If anything, the paint comes out a little bit cleaner because oak has such a grainy texture. Sometimes if you don't put more than 2 or 3 coats on it, you'll actually see that grain texture through the paint. And that was all I did. I centered a groove down the center of this, 3/4 inch ply, 3/4 inch groove, and I just glued that chisel base into it. And since this is going to be pretty lightweight, I just did 2 cleat pieces on the edge. I had 2 little scrap cutoffs from that entire sheet of ply from the original cleats for the wall, so I had a 45 on those, and those are what I'm attaching. So on this one, I decided to center the weight in the middle. Obviously, as you can see, it goes on the cleat. So with the cleat at the top there, you can see the entire portion of that backer covers that 3-inch cleat. If you had the cleat in the middle or even towards the bottom, that's where you start to get a situation where it rocks. Whatever backer you're using, essentially the part that's touching the wall, you want it to come in contact with a lot of that cleat. It'll make it the most stable. And then I have 3 sets of very inexpensive chisels. I have different degree bevels on them, and now I can have them separated in sections, which makes life a little bit easier. So the next one I'm making here, same process. You can see I wrote out all my measurements. You can pause this if you want to recreate something like this, but basically same process. I'm going to utilize joinery that I usually use when building cabinetry, which is rabbets and dados, because I find it to be very strong and easy to glue up. And I have about, I think it's 5 drills and units I want to put in this. I just measured out their thicknesses, kind of gauged them with the plywood, and that's how I made all of my marks. So I basically just need to cut out these slits. I'm going to have them curved on the edge just to make it look a little bit nicer. And my camera died, but basically what I did was I went through with the radial arm saw and I cut up to that curve. So you could see at the drill press those original cuts, and then I just used a hole saw to drill out the arches. Once that's done, because the radial arm saw doesn't cut an even cut because it's a curved cutting tool, I could flip it over, go back to the saw, and you could kind of get an idea of how I did this originally and just finish those cuts to the curve, and then I'm left with nice straight clean cuts in there, and I could slide all of my drills in and out very easily. So for the sides, you could see the measurements. Once again, this is scrap. I'm basically just going to have a dado from where I'm putting the unit I just made. I have enough space so that my drills will fit in there with my batteries. I'm going to be putting a rabbet on the back to accept the backer, which is how I usually do my cabinetry. And then I'm going to have another dado at the top, because a lot of these I'm building with shelves. I'm one of those people that I just place stuff all around the shop. So far this little shelf I have at the top of this has been super helpful. It's easy to put my tape measure and my pencils up there, and I always remember where they are. So I just sent the piece through the dado, cut the two dados, and then I didn't want to change out the stack in the radial arm saw, so I just made 2 cuts to remove the material for the backer. This backer on this one, I think I used 1/4 inch because that's what I had. It works fine, but I probably would do a 1/2 inch on it if I had enough 1/2 inch material, just to make it a little sturdier. Once I had that done, the sides, it's pretty easy. I can measure for the top shelf, which is going to be the same width as the bottom shelf. I could put that in place, measure for the backer, and cut that. Same process. I'm going to chamfer this one as well, just because especially with this veneer ply, the veneers on this are very thin, so this is splinter sort of material, and sliding your hands on this stuff gets splinters all the time. So the chamfer not only gives it a nicer finished look, but it will help reduce getting splinters. And then I could just glue those to the sides. Like I said, when you're doing dados, it makes glue ups much easier. And on this one, I'm going to permanently attach the back with glue. A lot of cabinets I make the backs detachable because I have to transport them. It's a little bit easier if you can take the back off sometimes. But this is all scraps. You can see there's some sort of finish already on that ply. But I can let this set up, and then I could attach the cleat. Once again, this was the cleat I cut originally. Goes across the back. Now it's going through 1/4 inch, which is one of the reasons I probably would have done 1/2 inch. So I put 2 screws on the edges, and then from the front I put screws into the cleat. So same process, the cleat's kind of at the top, so you can see there's a lot of coverage over that, the cleat in the back. If you really wanted to, you could put a spacer on the bottom, but this sits on there without a problem. It doesn't rock or move, which is the beauty of these French cleats. Like I said, you could see how you can move stuff around and really kind of trim out this whole space. I'm planning on eventually making enough units to fill up this whole wall. There's a lot of tools I want to put up here, but after this initial run of starting this wall, I just haven't had time. The last one I'm going to do is for my sanders and my sandpaper. I had this stuff all over the shop. Mainly this was just to have a place to put all of my sandpaper. What I did was I collected all of it. I gauged how I was going to store it. I counted how many I had. I compared, obviously, their circular sheets to long sheets to flat sheets, and I kind of did a little math to figure that out. And what I decided to do was just to make almost a 3-compartment unit with 1/4 inch shelves in between, and then they were going to be sized to fit all of the paper. So what I wanted to do with this is make rabbets and dados. My 2 inner shelves, as you'll see, will actually get cut down later. But to make my life easier, I started with 4 pieces, or they were similar heights. so I could use the setup on the radial arm saw for all of my grooves, because the grooves are all going to be the same. For the sides, you can see I'm going to be putting, I think I used 1/2" ply for the top and bottom shelf, so I used the radial arm saw to cut those initial grooves, but then all the rest are 1/4 inch. And like I said, all of these dimensions are really based on scrap. Sometimes I use 1/4 inch where I probably prefer 1/2 inch, but I didn't have the 1/2 inch and vice versa. So once I had those upper and bottom grooves for the shelves, I can go through and do these 1/4 inch grooves, and you could see, because it's the same height coming off the top, all I have to do is move the stop and I could cut all the grooves. For the 2 panels in the middle, I'm cutting them on the front and the back, so that when I put them in place, you'll see everything will slide into place. And once I'm done, I'll have 4 identical pieces here. Really simple stuff. For these pieces that aren't as wide, dados and rabbets on the radial arm saw are so easy. So those are my 4 pieces. That's how they all lined up. And then for the 2 sides, I'm going to be doing another rabbet. At this point, I think I used 1/2 inch because this one's going to be holding quite a bit of stuff. So I took it back to the radial arm saw. I cut that 1/2 inch groove on the back, which is going to be my rabbet, which will hold the backer. And then I could lay out the sandpaper. I'm basically going to have a center section for circular discs, which will fit up to 6-inch discs, because that's what I have in the shop. I have a 4-inch arbitral sander. I also have a sander that holds 6-inch discs, and then flat sheets. So the big rectangular square ones I'm going to cut in half so that they'll fit in the same sort of unit. And then I could go through with some 1/2 inch ply and cut all those shelves, because there's going to be a top shelf and a bottom shelf. And then I could trim my middle units down to size, because the backer's only going into the rabbets on my 2 edges. Your middle panels aren't as wide. Once I have my top shelves, I'm going to be putting 2 dados on those, because I'm attaching those inner shelves with dados on the top shelf. And then once I had all of those cut, I can go through, have this lined up perfectly, and then I could cut down these middle sections to size. So I'm going to be removing some material off the top, so you can see where that mark is, just so everything's lined up. And I could cut that down, and then also removing some material off the bottom, because like I said, I kept them long in order to make them identical to the sides. Can mark that, cut those down, and then you'll see they slide right into place. This will just make it so that all of my shelves are nice and square. So once that was done, I could go through and cut the backer. Like I said, this was 1/2 inch ply, and have that fit into place. I also have a some sandpaper that goes on my drum sander, which I don't really use a lot, and I also have some belts for the belt sander. So to use these, I decided just to put some dowels on the bottom, so 3/4 inch dowel holes I made, which will hold that stuff. And then I can make all the shelves. The shelves are all made out of scrap, so you'll notice they're all kind of different colors, different types of ply, but essentially they were all 1/4 inch ply. Some of the stuff is more like 3/16, but everything slides into the unit. I didn't glue these in place. I don't really think I need them to slide, but it is kind of convenient that they do. There's the dowels in the bottom, which will hold the belt sanding discs, and then I could just glue this whole unit together as well. All these rabbets and dados, they are more time consuming than butt joints, but they're going to be substantially stronger, and all this stuff is holding a fair amount of weight, so you do want some strength to it. And I also find that it's easier to get things square when you have all of these nice perpendiculars that everything slides into. Same thing with the back. I'm gluing all of that into place, and then I could clamp everything and let it set up. And I glued those dowels into the bottom as well, cut all of that paper, put it in there. I also left a couple spots. I think I have a couple empty spots if I get different size paper, but honestly, this stuff I've been collecting for years, so that's why I have so much. And then the top shelf on this one is going to hold my sanders. if you watch the channel, you can kind of get an idea of when I did this, because I have the French door project I've been working on sporadically as well, and I don't even have the glass in it yet in this video. And the sanders fit on top, and it kind of holds all my stuff. So there will be more videos of these as I build more stuff for the walls, but so far I'm pretty happy with it.